Hello, everyone. In this section, we're going to talk about schizophrenia. So, schizophrenia is a psychological disorder that is best characterized as a thought disorder. It involves a disruption in a person's thoughts, their perception, and their consciousness. And it severely impairs a person's ability to function in everyday life. Um, about 1 in 200 people are afflicted by schizophrenia, and it's equally common in men and women. Symptoms typically begin in a person's early 20s to 30s. And to be diagnosed, they have to have these symptomologies for more than 6 months. It should be noted that men typically experience the first onset of symptomologies earlier than women do. So when we're looking at the DSM-5, there's 5 key symptoms associated with schizophrenia. And these are delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, and a cluster of negative symptoms. And we'll discuss all these in a little more detail. So, in order for a person to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, the person must have at least 2 of these symptoms, and one of them must be either delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. So there's different ways that we can kind of conceptualize schizophrenia. And one of the most common ways is clustering their symptoms as either a positive symptom or a negative symptom. So you can kind of think of a positive symptom as there are things that are additions to normal functioning. So this includes things like delusions and hallucinations and disorganized speech or behavior. And they're called positive because they reflect something extra that maybe shouldn't be there. Negative symptoms, on the other hand, are reductions or losses in normal functioning, such as a lack of emotion, reduced speech, or social withdrawal. Negative symptoms are often harder to treat than the positive symptoms. So let's kind of look at some of these symptoms in a little more detail. So, delusions are false beliefs that are firmly held, even when there's evidence that contradicts them. For example, someone might believe that the government is tracking them, or that they're a famous historical figure. Hallucinations are false sensory experiences. The most common type in schizophrenia is auditory hallucinations, where people hear voices that other people don't hear. These voices may give commands, they may insult the person, or they may be just are running commentary. But hallucinations can also be visual, tactile, or even smell or taste based. Disorganized speech refers to speech that's jumbled or nonsensical. A person might jump from topic to topic in a way that makes no logical sense. That's something known as loose associations, or they might use clang associations, which is they're choosing words based on their sound rather than the meaning. Like they might rhyme unrelated phrases. Disorganized behaviors could be things that are unusual in what someone's doing. They could be wearing a heavy winter coat in the middle of summer. They could be acting aggressive without cause, or maybe they neglect basic hygiene. So about 1 in 4 people with schizophrenia um, experience negative symptoms, and these kind of symptoms tend to persist over time and are less responsive to medications for the treatment of schizophrenia. So, kind of examples of this are things like a flat affect. And so that's a lack of kind of normal emotional expression. Speech can be impaired. You can have kind of monotone speech, or they might have long pauses during conversations. And then you might observe kind of reduced motivation, reduced energy, or doesn't really have the ability to carry out daily activities. And these symptoms can, make it difficult to work and maintain relationships with people with schizophrenia. Interestingly, negative symptoms are more common in men than in women. So while we don't, fully understand the exact causes of schizophrenia, there is strong evidence that there is a genetic basis for schizophrenia. Schizophrenia tends to run in families. If we are looking at twin studies, you will see that if you have two identical twins who then share 100% of their genetics, you'll see that if one has schizophrenia, about 50% of the time, the other will also have schizophrenia. And if you look at non-identical twins who then share about the same genetic makeup as any siblings, then you see a similar lessening of that fraternal twins or siblings, if one has it, while there is increased likelihood the other will have it, it's much less than what we see for identical twins. So that tells us there is some type of genetic role, but it's not something that's purely determined by a gene. There's not some single gene for schizophrenia. Rather, there seems to be some kind of complex interaction of the genes and environmental factors that are involved. The schizophrenia typically emerges in early adulthood. And this could be linked some way to the brain developments that we see in this time. In the image here on this slide, you can see, my memory is that's two identical twins, one who has it and one who does not. And the arrows are pointing to the ventricles, those cavities that contain cerebral spinal fluid. And you can see the person with schizophrenia has an enlarged ventricle. And what that means is that represents a loss of neural tissue. So there's actually physical changes in the brain for a person with schizophrenia. Now, whether or not those biological changes cause schizophrenia in the brain or the schizophrenia causes those structural changes isn't exactly known. We also know that people who do not have family history of schizophrenia, but they develop schizophrenia, that they're more likely to have had a trauma, either like during or right around birth. And so maybe there's something there that increases susceptibility for individuals. So when we're looking at treatment of people with schizophrenia, your kind of most common treatment is going to be with antipsychotic medications. And so this was originally, you had these kind of first generation or conventional antipsychotic medications that heavily targeted dopamine receptors that were originally kind of seen as tranquilizers. And honestly, they were trying to sedate people with schizophrenia. And then they accidentally discovered that they had this improvement in positive symptoms. But unfortunately, there were a lot of side effects associated with these drugs. One of the more severes is known as tardive dyskinesia, which is these involuntary movements, especially like the face of the tongue. And unfortunately, once it kind of develops, it's often irreversible. Now we have newer generations of these drugs. We these second generation antipsychotics or the atypical antipsychotic medications. And while they still have some interactions with dopamine, they also target some other neurotransmitters as well. And they also often act as they have kind of special properties about how they bind to receptors in the brain that actually allow to target different area of the brains in different ways. And so that helps them to treat both the positive and some of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. That being said, while these drugs have much the second generation antipsychotics definitely have much fewer side effects than the earlier medications, they still do have this. You can have weight gain, heart issues, seizures. So you still need to be able to like monitor people who are on it. So it's still it's not perfect, but it is better.